My friend Liam and I had a strange hobby. We were obsessed with industrial decay. While other college kids were at parties, we were poring over old maps, looking for forgotten factories and mills. Our holy grail was the White Star Cannery, a massive brick complex that had closed down in the late 70s after a series of mysterious accidents. Local legends were tame, the usual stories of ghostly workers and strange noises. But for us, the real allure was the scale of the place. It was a self-contained world of rust and silence, a monument to a dead industry. We spent weeks planning our trip, studying the layout from satellite images and old newspaper articles. We knew security was non-existent. The place was so remote and dilapidated that nobody bothered to patrol it. We packed our gear, flashlights, cameras, and a small crowbar just in case, convinced this would be our greatest exploration yet. We were looking for history, for the echoes of lives long past. We had no idea we were about to walk into a place where the echoes were still screaming.
The cannery was even more imposing in person. It loomed out of the overgrown fields like a brick titan, its smokestacks reaching for the gray, overcast sky. A rusted chain-link fence full of holes was the only thing separating the grounds from the surrounding wilderness. The air was thick with the smell of rust, stagnant water, and damp concrete. As we stepped onto the property, an unnatural silence fell over us. No birds, no insects, just the sound of our own footsteps on the gravel. The main processing building was our target. We found an entry point through a shattered loading bay door, the broken glass crunching under our boots. Inside, the factory floor was a cavernous space filled with colossal steel vats and silent, unmoving conveyor belts. Muted light filtered through the grime-caked windows high above, casting long, eerie shadows that danced and shifted as we moved. It was a cathedral of decay, and for a while we were lost in its desolate beauty, snapping photos and whispering in awe.
We explored the main floor for over an hour, marveling at the machinery that was slowly being consumed by nature. But it was in the back of the complex, in a section marked Management, that our adventure took a dark turn. We found a heavy steel door with a rusted, heavy-duty lock. It was clearly the main office, and it was the only door in the entire building that had been secured. Liam was ready to move on, but my curiosity was piqued. Why lock just one room? Using the crowbar, we managed to pry the rusted lock from its housing. The door swung inward with a deep groan, revealing not an office, but a room unlike anything I had ever seen. The air that rushed out was cold and carried a strange electric smell, like ozone mixed with something sweet and rotten. The floor and walls were covered in complex, spiraling symbols painted in what looked like dried blood, all leading to the center of the room.
There, in the middle of the symbols, stood a grotesque sculpture. It was a twisted effigy, about 6 feet tall, constructed from rusted metal parts from the factory machinery, animal bones, and wires. Dark, tar-like goo dripped from it, pooling on the floor. It was a horrifying, almost organic-looking creation, and it seemed to hum with a silent, malevolent energy. Liam, who was usually the braver of the two of us, immediately backed away, his face pale. He whispered that we needed to leave, that something was deeply wrong with this place. I, on the other hand, was frozen, my morbid fascination overriding my fear. I took a step closer, raising my camera to take a picture, wanting to capture this bizarre, ritualistic scene. I felt a strange pull towards the effigy, a feeling that I was in the presence of something ancient and unholy. Just as I was about to press the shutter, a sound from outside shattered the silence. It was the unmistakable rumble of a truck engine, growing closer. We looked at each other in panic. The sound was followed by the loud clang of the main gate being forced open. Someone was here. These weren't kids or explorers. Whoever was coming knew how to get in. We instantly realized that the locked room wasn't meant to keep people out. It was a private space, a sanctuary, and we had just desecrated it. The thrill of exploration was gone, replaced by the primal fear of being caught by whoever had created that monstrous shrine. We had stumbled into something we were never meant to see, and the owners were coming home. We had to hide, and we had to do it now. We scrambled out of the room, leaving the door hanging open, and dove behind one of the massive steel vats on the factory floor. We crouched in the darkness, trying to control our breathing as we heard the truck pull up to the building and the engine cut out. Heavy footsteps followed, and then muffled voices, low and guttural. They weren't speaking English. It sounded like a chant, a rhythmic, guttural language that seemed to echo the strange energy of the shrine room. We stayed frozen for what felt like an eternity, listening to the sounds of movement from the back of the factory. We never saw them, and we didn't dare to try. The fear of what they would do if they found us was more terrifying than any ghost story. After what seemed like a lifetime, we heard the chanting stop, followed by the sound of the truck engine starting up again. We waited until the rumble faded into the distance before we made a move. Then we ran. We didn't look back. We didn't stop for anything. We sprinted across the factory floor, out the broken loading bay door, and through the woods, not slowing down until we were back in the safety of my car, speeding down the highway. We never spoke about what we saw in that room. There was no need. The image of that effigy and the sound of those voices were burned into our minds. We had gone looking for a dead factory, but we found something very much alive. A dark ritual that was still being practiced in the forgotten corners of the world. We were lucky to have escaped with just a story.
My girlfriend Maya and I loved hiking, especially going off-trail to find hidden spots. We were exploring a state forest we'd never been to before, following what we thought was a deer trail, when we realized we were completely and utterly lost. The sun was getting low, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and a chill was setting in. Panic started to bubble up when, through the trees, we saw it. A small wooden cabin with a thin plume of smoke curling from its stone chimney. It wasn't on any map. Relief washed over us. We figured we could ask for directions, maybe even get some water. The cabin didn't look abandoned. It was well maintained, with neatly stacked firewood on the porch and clean windows. It looked like a peaceful retreat from the world, a cozy haven in the middle of the wilderness. As we got closer,
we noticed something strange. There was no car, no sound of people, just the crackling of the fire from inside. We called out, "Hello, is anyone there?" But the only answer was the whisper of the wind through the pines. We hesitated on the porch for a moment, unsure of what to do. The thought of spending the night lost in the woods was terrifying, so I cautiously tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. That was the first major red flag, but our desperation outweighed our caution. We pushed the door open and stepped inside, calling out again. The interior was incredibly neat and tidy. A fire was smoldering in the fireplace, casting a warm, flickering glow across the room. A half-empty mug of what smelled like tea sat on a small table. Whoever lived here had clearly just stepped out.
The cabin consisted of one main room, a small kitchen area, and a single closed door at the back. It felt wrong to be there, like we were intruding on someone's private sanctuary, but we reasoned we would just wait for the owner to return and explain our situation. While we waited, my curiosity got the better of me. I noticed the walls were bare, except for a few framed photos of landscapes. They were beautiful, professional quality shots of the surrounding forest. This person was clearly a talented photographer. That's when I noticed the door at the back. It was slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I discovered it wasn't a bedroom or a bathroom. It was a fully equipped darkroom. The red glow of a safe light filled the small space, and the sharp chemical smell of developer fluid hung in the air. Dozens of black and white photos were hanging from lines, held by clothespins, in various stages of drying. But these weren't landscapes. My blood ran cold as I realized what I was looking at. They were photos of people. People sleeping in their beds, eating at their dinner tables, watching TV on their couches, all taken from outside through their windows. It was a gallery of stolen private moments. I saw the same faces in multiple pictures, their homes documented from every angle. This wasn't just a photographer, this was a stalker. I felt sick to my stomach and was about to call Maya into the room when I saw a freshly developed photo, still dripping wet, hanging by itself at the end of a line. I moved closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The photo was of a car, a familiar-looking blue sedan parked on a gravel turnout by the side of a road. It took me a second to process it, and then a wave of pure terror washed over me. It was my car, our car, parked at the trailhead where we had started our hike hours ago. He had seen us. He had photographed us before we had even stepped foot in the woods. This wasn't a random cabin we had stumbled upon. We had been watched, and we had walked right into the lion's den. This person wasn't just a stalker of strangers. We were his new subjects. The cozy warmth of the cabin instantly vanished, replaced by a suffocating sense of being trapped.
Just as the horrifying realization hit me, we heard the sound of footsteps on the front porch, the heavy creak of wood under someone's weight. He was back. Maya and I locked eyes, our faces masks of pure fear. There was nowhere to run. The main door was the only way out, and he was right there. We couldn't even scream. The sound was caught in our throats. We were trapped in the dark room, surrounded by the evidence of this man's twisted obsession, with him just feet away on the other side of the wall. We could hear him moving around in the main room, the sound of the teacup being placed back on the saucer, the gentle stoking of the fire. He was completely calm, unaware that his latest subjects were hiding in his secret room. We knew we had only seconds to act. I spotted a small, grimy window at the back of the darkroom, half hidden behind some shelves. It was our only chance. While the man was distracted, I quietly slid the window open. It was a tight squeeze, but we managed to scramble out, one after the other, into the cold night air. We didn't dare look back. We just ran, crashing through the underbrush, fueled by pure adrenaline. We didn't follow the trail. We just ran in the opposite direction of the cabin, praying we were heading towards the road. We eventually stumbled out onto the highway, miles from our car, where a passing truck thankfully stopped for us. We never told the police. What could we say? That we got lost and trespassed in a cabin? We had no proof, and we were terrified of what might happen if he knew we had escaped. I still have nightmares about those photos. We were just a random target, a subject for his collection. And I know, with chilling certainty, that somewhere out there, our picture is still hanging in that dark room, a trophy from the day we trespassed into a predator's lair.
My group of friends and I considered ourselves seasoned urban explorers. We had been through abandoned hospitals and forgotten asylums, but we were always looking for something more, something that felt truly lost to time. We found it in the legend of the Siren Bunker, an old Cold War-era fallout shelter built deep in a national forest. The stories were that it was a government listening post that was decommissioned in the 80s. Local kids who had supposedly found it claimed that on quiet nights you could hear a faint siren sound coming from deep underground. We dismissed it as folklore, but the idea of a fully intact Cold War bunker was too good to pass up. We spent a month researching, using old geological surveys and declassified military maps to triangulate its probable location. It was a long shot, but the thrill of the hunt was half the fun.
Finding the entrance was the hardest part. It was a heavy circular steel hatch, almost completely swallowed by decades of moss and overgrowth, just like the legends said. It took the combined effort of all four of us, straining against a rusted handle with a crowbar to get it to budge. When it finally scraped open, a blast of cold, stale air rushed out, carrying a smell like damp concrete and old electricity. It smelled like a tomb. One by one, we descended a rickety iron ladder into the pitch-black void below, our flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The air was heavy and claustrophobic. The only sounds were the dripping of water from the ceiling and the echo of our own nervous breathing against the concrete walls. The place was a time capsule, a relic of a paranoid era. We explored the first few levels, finding empty dormitories with rusted bed frames and a mess hall with tables still set. It was clear the place had been evacuated in a hurry. But our goal was the control room, the supposed heart of the bunker. We found it on the lowest level, behind a massive blast door that was hanging slightly ajar. The room was like something out of an old sci-fi movie,
filled with huge analog computer consoles and banks of switches, all covered in a thick layer of dust. Everything was dead and silent. In the center of the room, however, was a reel-to-reel tape player with a large tape still loaded onto the spools. It was the only thing in the room that seemed almost prepared. Overcome by curiosity, my friend Dave, who was an engineering student, pulled out a portable battery pack he always brought with him and managed to rig it to the tape player's power supply. We all held our breath as he flipped a switch. After a moment of static, the reels began to turn, and a voice crackled through the ancient speakers. It was a panicked man, his voice strained. He was counting down. Containment protocol initiated. T-minus 30 seconds. We all looked at each other, confused and a little spooked. The countdown continued, growing more frantic until it reached 0. Then, a deafening siren blared from the speakers, so loud we had to cover our ears. It was the sound from the legends. The recorded siren lasted for about a minute, and then it was replaced by something else. The sounds of chaos, panicked shouting, alarms, and then screams, horrible, terrified screams that sounded all too real. But it was the sound that came after the screams that has haunted me ever since. It wasn't human. It was a deep, guttural, clicking roar, a sound that vibrated through the floor and seemed to claw at the inside of our skulls. It was a sound of pure alien malice. We were all frozen in terror, listening to this horrifying recording of the bunker's final moments. This wasn't just a listening post, it was a containment facility for something, and whatever it was, it had gotten out. As the grotesque sounds from the tape echoed through the room, we heard something else. A new sound, one that wasn't coming from the speakers. It was a faint scratching, coming from the far end of the control room. We aimed our flashlights and saw another massive blast door, this one sealed shut, with a large red warning sign that had been scratched and clawed at from the other side. The scratching started again, louder this time, more frantic. It was a dry scraping sound, like claws on fixed steel. It was responding to the recording. Whatever was on that tape, a piece of it was still here, trapped behind that door, and we had just woken it up. We didn't wait to find out what was making the noise. Dave ripped the wires from the tape player, plunging the room back into silence. But the scratching from behind the door continued, growing more desperate. We scrambled for the exit, our minds racing with the horrifying implication of what we had discovered. This bunker wasn't built to protect people from something outside. It was built to keep something in. We fled up the iron ladder, not looking back, and slammed the heavy steel hatch shut behind us, the sound of the scratching still echoing in our ears. We ran through the woods and didn't stop until we reached our car. We never went back, and we never told anyone the full story. Sometimes I wonder if that tape is still down there, waiting for the next group of curious explorers to press play. And I wonder how thick that steel door really is.